The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening. Sometimes the recording that they have when I turn the broadcast on scares me. All right, we're at week 3. We're doing this. So we're getting towards the top of the summit as we go through this week, and then we're going to be able to kind of start slowly stepping down again starting next week. So that means that we're going to be taking out a few more items this week and then possibly starting to add things back in depending on how you feel. So you will notice that in the background here, we're going to be talking about hormones, and I also put it out there in the email that that's what we are going to be talking about. In your notebook, it does say that this is the week where we go over digestion, and that is not something that I'm going to ignore, and I'm going to touch on the gut and digestion next week because it's such an important part of our health. Our gut is our second brain, and that's how important it is. But the reason why I moved up the subject of hormones is that is where people seem to have the highest scores. And when I talk about hormones, I'm talking about insulin as well as the sex hormones, cortisol, and thyroid. So it's a pretty big subject and reaches a lot of different areas. So I'm going to jump in and talk about what you're going to be doing as far as food adjustments this week. And basically, you're going to be following the list that you have in your book about the do's and don'ts and the Pekin guideline. But we're going to take out all grains. So that Grains, not greens, but grains. And that includes, we're going to be taking out your quinoas, you're taking out your buckwheat, your oats, anything that comes from a grain, okay? And we're also going to be taking out legumes, which are your beans, we're not eating soy, but your lentils and things like that. And the reason that we're doing that for the legumes, some people have sensitivities. It's difficult for them to digest. So we're just taking out anything that could cause inflammation. Some people are fine with it, but we're just going to take it out for this week. And I think the bigger question is, why are we taking out all grains and not just gluten-containing grains or corn, which is also an irritant to a lot of people? And the reason that we're doing that is basically twofold. One is people who may not test or feel a sensitivity to gluten. In other words, they don't have celiac disease, they don't have a gene, and you can actually test for this. You can test for a gene that will indicate that a person can be sensitive to gluten. And by the way, a lot of people don't know what gluten is, but gluten is a protein. Gluten is a protein that we find in wheat, we find in rye, we find in spelt. So basically that's what that is. So gluten isn't found in quinoa, it's not found in oats, it's not found in buckwheat, it's not found in things like that. But for some people, they can still have a sensitivity to the protein, even though it's not gluten, in these flours. And this is one of the things I have my clients take out if there's a lot of joint pain and arthritis, just a lot of overall body pain. I have them take all the grains out and for 30 days, not just a week, but for 30 days, and just see what happens to the body, see how much it calms down. So that's one reason why we're taking the grains out. The other reason why we're taking the grains out is that I want to kind of push your body into a state of a more ketosis state. Now, we're not going to get to the state of ketosis because we're still allowing some sweets and some non-processed sugars and things like that. But we're going to kind of move the body there. And what's the point of that? A lot of us have become, or our bodies have become, not only our brains and our mouths, but our bodies have become dependent on getting their fuel sources from carbs. Okay, so a lot of people long distance runners and trainers had learned to carbohydrate load, and what ended up happening was that the body becomes dependent on those carbs, and it forgets how to tap into the fat stores that we have. And so I'm trying to kind of push things along to allow the body to let go of the fat stores that we have by taking these grains away. And also when we take these grains away, well, what do we fill our plates up with, right? We got to fill it up with something. I really don't want you to change the amount that you're eating as far as calories, and we're not really counting calories, but we need to fill it up with good fats. So avocado oil, avocados, nuts and seeds, coconut oil, butters, your olive oil in the morning. So all of those types of fat we're going to increase a little bit. And hopefully you're also going to be increasing the amount of vegetables that you're eating. One of the ways to kind of fill up that gap of taking out the starches, the flours, is to put in your sweet potatoes, to put in your root vegetables. So your rutabagas, your parsnips, turnips, there's so many different types of root vegetables, celery root, and then maybe add in some cruciferous. So your cauliflower is great to take the place of rice, your cauliflower rice, or also to take the place of mashed potatoes. So I like to, and for Thanksgiving I did this, and my group of, we had 12 people I think, our mashed potatoes were a combination of rutabagas and cauliflower and garlic and lots of butter and salt and pepper. And they were phenomenal. And so you learn how to use different things. And hopefully you saw the email that I sent out yesterday, which had some links to get you to different types of cauliflower rice recipes, a shoestring potato recipe as well, shoestring sweet potato recipe. So check those out. So you need new tools, and I just like to share something here that Jeanette posted on Facebook, and it was just very poignant and very much right on. And then I'll answer someone's question here. And that is, let me do it here. She goes, on this path, it seems like we can eat nothing. But then again, we can eat so much. And that's really true. It's just that we have to make that shift, okay? And it takes effort, it takes time, it takes exploration, it takes curiosity, it takes all of that, and I get it. So if you could even just make one new thing every week, you are going to be so far ahead of the game in familiarizing yourself with using different ingredients. And again, I'm going to remind you of the, I think it's called the Sun Basket, which is a delivery, home delivery, where your food's all packaged, and it caters to the paleo, which is kind of where we are, especially this week, that's where we are. And so it gives you a chance to experiment using different ingredients, and in a very controlled way, and then they've got the recipes with it, so it just makes it really easy to try new things out. I'm going to pause here and look at a question. Okay. I'm going to answer this later. Okay, but great. And yes, I'm going to invite you to make sure that you do put things in the chat box, and I'll answer them either as they come in, or I might answer it at the end. Okay? Alrighty. I'm not sure if anyone did end up taking me up on the invitation to create a MyFitnessPal account. If you did, I'd like to hear how that went and how many grams of sugar. So did anyone count their grams of sugar? Did anyone look at their grams of fat and protein and carbohydrates, and was there any surprises as you went along? So I'm kind of curious about that, and if you didn't last week, maybe that's something that you incorporate this week. Now, I do realize that I've given you guys a lot of things to do each week. All right, so if that's something you choose not to do, that's great. It's just a resource for you. Okay, and I think at week 3, when it gets possibly a little bit tougher, I want to talk about or remind you what this cleanse does for you if you allow it. Okay, so this is just a reminder, and I would like you to remind yourselves of why you're doing this. So this cleanse lets your body rest and reset, okay? And one of the ways you can facilitate that is to have that 30-minute early morning time when you do that, okay? Where you can journal, you can meditate, you have your olive oil and lemon and maybe something, lemon water to drink. You know, it's just a time to be quiet so we're not jumping out, we're not getting our media right in front of us. It's an opportunity to bring an important and real awareness of how you feel when you do things differently. And hopefully you've been surprised at some of the things that you've given up, that it was a lot easier than you thought it would be, and maybe you're not even missing it very much. And then maybe the opposite has happened, is you thought it'd be easy to give something up, and it's like, oh my goodness, this is so hard. But hopefully that, oh my goodness, this is so hard, goes away pretty quickly. It's an opportunity to tap into experiencing what feeling really good looks and feels like. All right, so you get an opportunity to do that. So many people do not have this opportunity to do it because they go to their doctors to give them a pill, and they're never taught how to tap into that reservoir and that own innate doctor that we have within. So this gives you an opportunity to do that, which is exciting, very, very exciting. You guys are pioneers. All right. You're learning new tools and ways of shopping and choosing to eat at home as well as eating out. And let's see. I'm going to read you this email I got from a participant last year, just because I liked what he said, and I think what I wrote back, it's just a good reminder for everybody. So, and last year, we had a bigger group, and we had quite a range of what people knew, what they didn't know, as far as food, as far as health, so many different things. And this particular participant was in his 70s, which was wonderful. And I would say on a scale of 1 to 10 that his knowledge base is probably about a 3. So this is a huge learning curve for him. And man, he stuck it out and had lots of questions. And at one point, it was a longer email than this, but I'm just taking this one. He says, I'm not totally lost, just sidetracked. I believe my progress is not as speedy as you may expect or would like. So this is how I responded. I have no expectations. I can only hope that what I'm doing will make a difference for you. And I want to remind you that everyone signed up for various reasons and with varying degrees of knowledge and experience. So do the best you can. If you're going to adhere to this all the way for 2 weeks, you will feel a difference. If you're going to adhere to this for 60%, you will also feel and see a difference. And I said this the very first week of the webinar. Okay, everyone comes in for a different time. Remember, when you get pulled astray, that you can very easily get back into the saddle, and every time you do, you learn. When you aren't doing it perfectly, instead of condemning yourselves, pause and notice why there's a resistance or why it seems so hard. So this is going back to last week's webinar, okay? What Barbara said, what some things I've been saying as well. And also stop and think, what is it that you think you're giving up, okay? Or stop and notice when you think that. And this is, if you can switch it to what are you gaining? So that's switching that mindset of giving up to something positive to what you're gaining. Sometimes we don't know what we're going to gain because we haven't experienced it yet. But if we stay curious, we'll notice even the little things that we gain, and that can make a really big impact. So I'm just reminding you, food is information. Our habits are information. So during this 30-day period, you're giving yourselves an opportunity to look at what you eat. You get to notice your patterns and increase your awareness. So I want to remind you that, putting one foot in front of the other and pausing to notice makes a huge difference. And I want to remind you to be kind to yourselves, okay? You guys are wonderful, you're courageous, and you're here tonight, and you keep on putting one foot in front of the other and staying curious just by being here tonight. So I congratulate you, and hopefully you're congratulating yourselves as well. All right, so tonight I am going to turn off the webcam as I go through the webinar. I really didn't pause. Jeanette jumped in, which I'm glad you did, Jeanette. And you were asking some questions. I'm going to go to you guys right now, and if you have any burning questions right now or anything you'd like to relate to me or the other participants before we jump into hormones, please do so. Oh shoot, Jeanette, guess what? How do I re-find your questions? You know what? At the end of the webinar, Jeanette, if I can't find your questions again, just write something out because it brings up that icon for me. Okay? All right. So I am going to stop sharing this, and we're going to go to hormones. All right. Hormones are fascinating because they are so far-reaching. And they're really what run our bodies, okay? They keep us alive, literally. So they're very powerful messengers, and they're involved in almost every function of our body in one way or another. If there's good communication going on between our hormones, our glands, our organs, and body systems and neurotransmitters, then you're going to feel pretty good, and your health is going to be in pretty good shape. If there's bad communication, what we see and feel is fatigue, often depression, anxiety, memory problems, weight gain, and chronic illness. So you could say that these chemicals, which are called hormones, are that course through our bodies is the difference basically between miserable or being on top of the world, and even the difference between life and death, literally. So I love this little picture because sometimes I feel that way. Whoops. And this is what I call the 4 F's, and this is what it looks like. The 4 F's is that you feel pretty frazzled, frumpy, fat, and fatigued. Okay? And there are occasions when I feel that, not very often, but I know a lot of women that come in to see me, that is how they feel. And they can be women in their 30s and their 40s. And so they're not even looking like this, but that's how they're feeling. And then we have the male version of this, and he's grouchy, fat, has low T and probably a little bit of erectile dysfunction, and is tired out, and he's not very pleasant to be around, and either is the woman with the 4 F's, okay? So, this hormone disruption can happen in both men and women for a variety of reasons, and it's mainly tied to what we eat, the health of our digestive system, lifestyle, stress, toxic load, inflammation, all that good stuff that I keep on harping on. So often when we think of hormones, we think about our sex hormones, which are very important. For some reason, this presentation wants to always go one slide ahead, so sorry about that. Our sex hormones do influence our energy and our moods and our weight and our sex drive, and that includes our estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, and a precursor called DHEA. But just as important, and probably actually these are more important, are our hormones, including insulin, thyroid, and cortisol. So we can basically do without estrogen and testosterone and progesterone. We're not going to feel that great, but we don't necessarily have to have those hormones in order to survive, whereas we have to have insulin to survive. We have to have thyroid hormones to survive, and we have to have cortisol. So I am going to hit on these three first, and then we're going to hit on the sex hormones last. So I just want to briefly touch on these. Insulin is a fat-storing hormone. Thyroid is responsible for our metabolism and energy, believe it or not, our bowel movements, libido, and can also influence depression. Each cell in our body has a site for the thyroid hormone to attach to. So not only is it responsible for our overall metabolism, it's responsible for each metabolism or speed of energy of each individual cell. And then our cortisol governs our, which is our stress hormone, our hunger, our cravings, digestion, blood pressure. You're going to see all of that in another slide. So I'm going to move on. So I really like this diagram because I think it's hard to, I think for most of us, kind of fathom exactly what's happening with insulin and with blood sugar and why insulin is actually a fat storing hormone. I don't think people realize that. So there is a cycle that goes on, and it becomes a perpetual cycle unless we break it, which is what we're doing here in our transformational cleanse during these 4 weeks. So this is what happens. You eat sugar, you like it, you crave it. It has an addictive property. So you eat sugar, and what happens is your blood sugar levels spike. Dopamine is released, and that can cause an addiction response. And what happens is when this cupcake or donut or whatever it is, okay, something simple, a piece of bread, is eaten and there's no protein, there's no fat to slow down the breakdown of that sugar or that grain, and there's no slowing down of the absorption of that because there's no fiber, no fat, no protein to do that, it goes into our bloodstream really fast. And so what it does is it spikes our blood sugar up to a level that our body goes, can't do that. So our body has its range where it wants to keep it in, called homeostasis, right? So what happens is that insulin marches out and gathers up all of that glucose. And glucose is energy, okay? That's what that is. It's a measure of energy, or calories are a measure of energy, but glucose is a source of energy. And unless we're really working out right then to use up that immediate energy, that insulin's going to lasso it all up, and it's got to put it somewhere, right? It's not being utilized, but it's got to lower that blood sugar. So it puts it in our fat cells. So it is a fat storing hormone. So it goes into our fat cells, and our glucose level in our blood lowers, okay? Sometimes it can really go low. And what happens then, because it falls rapidly, it signals to our body that we're hungry again, that we need more glucose again. So then what happens is our cravings get stimulated again because we have low blood sugar. Well, what raises low blood sugar quickly? Well, a sweet or a simple carb raises it up very, very quickly. So that's what our brains go to. And then here we go. We do it again and again and again. All right? So that's kind of the cycle that we get into. Oh, I meant to change this. It doesn't really matter. I meant to change this to like a 600-calorie breakfast because that's kind of what we're looking at with the 2 donuts, and I think with this breakfast here. This breakfast here is probably more like an 800-calorie breakfast, but let's pretend it's just a half of an avocado and 2 poached eggs, or 2 eggs on top. Okay, whatever it is, the point that I'm trying to make with this slide is this has the same amount of calories as this is. Let's take 1 avocado away and we're about there, okay? then it has about the same amount as this traditional breakfast, which is orange juice and probably some granola or Kellogg's flakes with some dried fruit, and we got bread here, and we got milk here, and we got strawberries here. I mean, that was the traditional breakfast for many, many years. But let's talk about what happens here. This 500 or 600 calories here is made up of fats and protein and fiber. It is going to take probably about 3 to 4 at least hours. It might even sustain us if we eat both of these avocados for 5 hours, okay? Because it's fat, protein, and fiber. So it's going to keep our blood sugar levels at a really nice level, even level for 4 to 5 hours. That's awesome. It doesn't cause inflammation in our body. It doesn't cause a spike. It doesn't cause all these different things that something like these donuts will cause. So this will go into our bloodstream, boom, like that. And it might satiate us for maybe 2 hours, and then we're going to be hungry again. So even though this is the same amount of calories here, we're going to be hungry again, and we're going to want to eat again. That's how we gain weight. Same thing with this. This is not going to last you for more than maybe 3 hours. So I would say these two right here are going to be done and through your system within about 2 to 3 hours, and this is going to last. So this is why we want to shift things and take grains out, take sugars out, and shift to a higher fat, fiber, and protein content. And then, you throw some coffee on there, which stimulates our cortisol, and that's also going to spike blood sugar up as well. So this is what we want to avoid. This is what we want to start leaning towards. I hope that was helpful. Okay. We're going to go to the thyroid, and the thyroid gland, I think most of you know, is that little gland that's on your throat, and people say it looks like a butterfly. To me, it looks like a bow tie, but anyway, again, it's responsible for your overall metabolism and the metabolism of each cell, and we can have either an underactive thyroid, which is hypothyroid, or an overactive thyroid, which is hyperthyroid. And each condition comes with its own set of problems. So what are some signs of hypothyroidism? Low energy, weight gain, fatigue, depression, constipation, loss of hair, brittle nails, dry skin, and low sex drive. And it's estimated that about 60 million men and women struggle with thyroid problems, and most of them don't know it. Most of it's undetected, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Most of it is because a full thyroid panel is rarely taken by a physician unless they're educated or unless there's overt signs that there might be a problem with the thyroid. I'm talking overt. About 20% of women face a chance of developing a thyroid problem at some point in their lives, and I often see it show up right about around perimenopause and menopause and right after pregnancy, and that's when there's a big shift in hormones, which can be very stressful on our bodies and can for some reason trigger that. And by the way, low thyroid in men can contribute to heart disease, and thyroid is screened more frequently in women than men, other than the TSH, and I'll talk about that in a minute. TSH is usually screened in men as well, but we need way more than that to have a proper screening. Hyperthyroid, what would you see? You could see possibly a goiter or an inflammation, a swelling around the thyroid. Often it's precipitated by difficulty sleeping. So if we have a hyperthyroid and we're just going, we have a difficult time sleeping, and we can often see weight loss as well. So how and where are our thyroid hormones made? And I don't like to get too technical, but I do want to go through this with you. So there's a feedback loop. There's a feedback loop with everything in our body, okay? We're just amazingly designed. So this is your thyroid gland right here in your throat, okay? Everything above this, above your throat, is in your brain. So The TSH, which is the thyroid stimulating hormone, which is what most doctors use to screen for proper thyroid health, okay, is actually not produced in your thyroid, it's produced in your brain. So this might be normal, but we might have a problem with what's happening in your thyroid. So that's why we have to do additional testing, which the next slide I'll go over that. But I just want to talk about the feedback loop. So your thyroid gland makes two different types of hormones, T4 and T3. And just to kind of let you know what this is, the T stands for tyrosine, which is an amino acid. And then there's iodine attached to this amino acid. That's really what this hormone is. And when it's T4, there's 4 molecules of iodine attached to the tyrosine. When it's T3, there's only 3, okay? So your thyroid hormone produces about 80% of T4, which is an inactive form. In other words, your cells can't use this. Isn't that funny? That's our carrier. And only about 20% of the T3. This T4 has to go to the liver and a little bit to the digestive system to be converted to this active form, which is the form we need. But anyway, if your body is making enough of these two things, there should be a feedback loop that tells your body how much TSH it needs to make. So this feedback loop goes up to your brain, and then goes to the hypothalamus, then to the pituitary, and then it decides how much TSH it needs to make. So thyroid stimulating hormones. So this means this is a hormone that stimulates your thyroid. So that's kind of how it works. So what can interfere with this? Stress, a problem with your sleep cycle, cortisol levels, problems with psychologically, cold. There's a lot of different things that can interfere with this. So what to test to get the whole picture of the health of your thyroid and if you have enough thyroid. Again, the thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH, if you guys were to look at your labs, especially men, they're going to measure this, but it's not enough information. And then a lot of them will go ahead and measure the free T4, which is the inactive form, right? Well, okay, but if it's not being converted to T3, which is the form that our cells can use, then that's still not giving us enough information. So I always ask my clients to have their doctor test for free T4, free T3. I also recommend having them tested for thyroid antibodies. And what are thyroid antibodies? This is an indication when these are tested and you have these antibodies, this is an indication that you have an autoimmune disease. And it's in this particular case, thyroid peroxidase what this indicates is that you have a form of hypothyroidism that's caused by your immune system attacking the thyroid. So we want to screen for this. Okay, always want to screen for this. And sometimes there might not be any symptoms, but if we can screen for this and see that, okay, we can start going ahead working on it before it does some real damage. So that's why I always recommend this, especially in women. And then I always like the reverse T3 because that will tell me whether or not the adrenal glands are really part of this whole T4 to T3 conversion. So these are the things that you want to have tested by your doctor, okay? Try to push for that, especially if you're having symptoms. All right, so we are going to move on to the adrenal glands. Is there anything else I want to say about this? No, okay. So the chemicals that the adrenal glands produce, they're all powerful. Adrenaline, cortisol, sex hormones, believe it or not, we have sex hormones that are produced in the adrenal glands, not just in the ovaries, and for men, the testes. Men, that's where you get your progesterone and estrogen. Partially where you get that is from the adrenal glands. See what it does? And then there's a hormone called aldosterone, which regulates the blood pressure. So adrenal glands we have 2 of them. They're located on top of your kidneys, and they are really little powerhouses, and they're responsible for regulating your blood sugar. They do have a direct influence on insulin. and they help to regulate your thyroid hormone production and conversion of that T4 to T3. They influence neurotransmitter production, your dopamine, serotonin, and GABAs. They help protect the digestive system, regulate blood pressure, and produce the sex hormones, progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, and DHEA. By the way, when I see on a lab an imbalance or something going on with sodium, potassium, I always think of the adrenal glands. All right. So what is linked to high cortisol? In other words, if we're in a high state of stress, our body is going to be producing cortisol. Our body produces cortisol in response to any type of stress, which I'll talk about a little bit more, what those stress triggers would be. So high cortisol is linked to diabetes, is linked to belly fat. Yes. So belly fat, that visceral fat, another name for it, has receptor sites that has 4 times the receptor sites for cortisol than other places in our body. Okay, so if we have that flat tire around that middle, should be looking at your stress level. High cortisol is also related to depression and suicide and emotional dysregulation. Delayed wound healing can be one of the culprits. A lack of zinc could be another culprit. High cortisol lends itself to infertility, PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, and PMS. It increases your sugar cravings because you want to feed that. It can contribute to hypothyroidism, high blood pressure, and low libido, or even high libido. That one can go either way. So some of your symptoms are you could be tired yet wired. You can be cranky, disrupted sleep, increased in your urination, increased appetite, and your hair can start falling out. So I put here some of the supplements that I like to use to calm the adrenals down, and that would be L-theanine. I recommend 200 to 400 milligrams in the morning. You can also do this at night to help you sleep. I love L-theanine. It's just a calmer. L-lysine is also another amino acid that you can take a couple times throughout the day, 500 milligrams. Seems to calm things down and help with hormones. Ashwagandha, rhodiola roots, those are adaptogens, and what that means is you can actually take these for either high or low cortisol, and your body will kind of do what it needs to do with them. So your body, they will adapt to what your body needs. There's something called phosphatidylserine, and it can help with sleep by lowering your cortisol at night, because some people, your cortisol level should be highest in the morning when you want to get up, you want to get things done, and then it slowly lowers throughout the day and should be at its lowest point at night when you want to sleep. And some people, they have that reverse where their cortisol levels start to go up about 8 o'clock at night. So it's really hard for them to go to sleep until like wee hours of the morning, and then it's really hard for them to get up because their cortisol levels are really low in the morning. So it's this vicious circle. And I want to point out something here. I know some of you scored high on the phosphatidyl or the acetylcholine test, and I recommended phosphatidylcholine for that. That is different from phosphatidylserine. I just want to point that out. Two completely different substances. Okay. Low cortisol, what is it linked to? It's linked to anxiety. High cortisol can too. Sorry about that. It's linked to hormonal imbalances, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. Digestive issues, increased infections, and increased allergies. Some of the symptoms we might see is we're really tired and burned out. We crumble under pressure, and that would be the anxiety, okay? Low blood pressure, and sometimes we have an indication something going on. Is like when we get up quickly, we can feel dizzy. That can be a sign that something's going on with our cortisol levels. We have a difficulty fighting infection. We have a slow recovery after exercise. So if you exercise and you find that you can't recover the same way you could before, that's a good indication that you need to back off a little bit. Your body's talking to you very, very loudly, and you need to be kind, okay, to your body and let it recover. You need to listen. You're less tolerant to temperature changes, cold and hot. And I teach the Bikram yoga, and I can watch some women, they did Bikram for a long time, and all of a sudden the temperature really gets to them. It's a real stressor on the adrenals. That temperature can be a big stressor, and if our adrenals are healthy, we can tolerate it. If it's not, we have to honor that. We can see low and unstable blood sugar. So I can see, I have some clients say, oh my gosh, I'm tanking, and so then I rush in and try to support their adrenals. We can see fibromyalgia from that, hair loss again, and low libido. I'm going to go back up to hormone imbalances here and talk about that for just a second. I did mention that progesterone, estrogen, testosterone are also made in the adrenal glands, as well as the ovaries and testes if you have them, depending on which ones you have. But if the body is requiring an increased amount of cortisol, or the adrenals just can't, or just have been taxed for months or years, and the cortisol level or production of cortisol is really low, what's going to happen is, since we can do without our sex hormones, it's going to shun everything over to producing that cortisol, because we can't live without cortisol. We cannot live without it. So it can cause an hormonal imbalance, because the estrogen, progesterone, testosterone that's normally produced in our adrenals, which isn't a high amount, but it's just enough, for that Goldilocks amount, we can start seeing a hormonal imbalance, especially if you're starting to go through perimenopause or menopause, and if you're going through what I call male menopause, okay? Men's testosterone level starts to drop, and if your adrenals are not functioning where they should be, you can feel a much harder hit. So supplements that I like to use to build the adrenals would be licorice root, adrenal glandular, DHEA, and a couple other things as well. Okay, so we're going to go back to our hormones, and I'm going to start with this menopausal bulge. And I guess I'm not. Yep. So what causes this menopausal bulge? And I know that we have some women here that are in menopause or perimenopause, and then we have a couple men here and a couple young women. But I hope this will all come in handy for you, because either you will have a mate that will go through this, or you yourself will eventually go through this. So what causes this menopausal bulge? I think two things: a drop in testosterone, as well as, a drop in estrogen. And it's our body letting us know that all of the insult that we've been doing to it over the last 20 years is finally catching up with us. And that means the insult to our liver, loading it up with toxins and chemicals and bad food, along with stressing out our adrenals. And again, we're bringing that visceral fat that's coming around. So it's just kind of a storm that all comes together, and this is one of the ways that it manifests. One of the best ways that you can help that visceral fat or that menopausal bulge is to go to a more vegan or paleo diet. Okay, that's one way. Another way is to increase with herbs and B vitamins to help your liver pull toxins out and pull estrogen out. And I'm going to mention something here very, very quickly. There's two genes, or three genes actually, that I like to test for in my office, and especially if there's a history of certain things. I'm not going to go into all that right now, but these genes can affect how well your body is able to pull toxins out, and also how well your body is able to pull estrogen out and your body's propensity to recycle the estrogen, okay? So your genes can play a role in all of this. And I want to talk about men too, because this actually applies to you and this bulge, and for a variety of reasons. And some men, there's an enzyme called aromatase that both men and women have, but mostly men. And that aromatase has the ability to turn testosterone into estrogen. And we want a little bit of it, okay? You don't want to be all testosterone. We want you to have a little bit of estrogen in there so you can live amongst us. Some men genetically will have a higher level of this enzyme, and we might see that they just inherently have a lower level of testosterone and they have a higher level of estrogen. What can turn this aromatase on or increase that enzyme is the food you eat and the stress that you have. So this is really important for you guys too. Okay, it just affects you just a little bit differently. So what can help pull estrogen out or excess progesterone out, and that can be a problem too, is the fiber that I mentioned, okay, by Zymogen, and also something called bentonite clay, bentonite clay. And the bentonite clay just kind of pulls toxins out. And I've known some women that have had a lot of success with just using that to help lose weight just because they're pulling toxins out. And that's where their big bugaboo was. So symptoms of estrogen dominance, and this is symptoms of estrogen deficiency. So dominance would be breast swelling and tenderness. Fibrocystic breasts, water retention, craving sweets, uterine fibroids, cystic ovaries, anxiety, nervousness, heavy and irregular menses, low libido, fatigue, weight gain, mood swings. It goes on and on and on. It is not easy being a woman. It is not, okay? Especially if your hormones are out of balance. So, when we say estrogen dominance, it doesn't necessarily mean that your estrogen levels are too high, although that can be the case. It refers more so to the fact that there's an imbalance between the amount of progesterone to estrogen that you have. So lots of times we need to up the amount of progesterone, and that can be through a cream. And then we do try to also lower the estrogen, and again, it's through pulling it out of our system. And then what we eat plays a huge role on estrogen production. Deficiency, so if we're deficient in estrogen, we might experience hot flashes, night sweats, mental fogginess, insomnia, heart palpitations, yeast infections, depression, bone loss, skin wrinkling, painful intercourse, low libido, vaginal dryness, headaches, memory lapse, incontinence, osteoporosis, increased alcohol and sugar cravings. Again, it's not easy being a woman, is it? Okay, symptoms and signs of progesterone imbalances. Deficiencies, which can be very similar to the estrogen excess, right, that imbalance. Swollen breasts, headaches, anxiety. So basically the same thing as what we said with estrogen dominance. And then if you have excess progesterone, let's look at that. Again, you can have sleep disorder, weight gain, mild depression, candida overgrowth. So kind of the same thing as we saw is if we have too little estrogen. So it's kind of the same thing in a sense. Okay, symptoms and signs of testosterone imbalances. So with men, I'm going to come back to you. Low T, we can often see high triglycerides, interestingly enough, and that is a precursor to diabetes. We'll see low libido. We can see erectile dysfunction, depression, grumpiness, fatigue, muscle loss, low energy, and an enlarged prostate, or even prostate cancer. So, and I'm going to come back to that in just a second. Yeah, okay. In women, if we have an elevated T, we might see a little more aggressiveness, hair in places we don't want them, growing, more anger, irritability, increased sexual desire, which might not be such a bad thing as far as men are concerned. But low T, we can have low libido and then muscle wasting and then lower energy as well in women. It hits men a little bit harder. And I just want to touch on a few things here, and that is, first of all, estrogen makes cells grow. So it stimulates tissue growth, which can affect, the tissue in our ovaries, our uterus, our breast, and our prostate. And going back to that enzyme, the aromatase for men, I know some doctors will not prescribe, I think this is still happening, will not prescribe testosterone supplementation or creams to men because they feel like it increases the risk of testicular or prostate cancer. And there is some bearing in that, but we have to understand why that is, okay? The reason is that depending on a man's aromatase, if we increase the amount of testosterone that we're giving him and his aromatase is very high, that increased testosterone is going to be turned into estrogen, okay? And that's going to be a problem. So 2 things. One is men. I see men in my office and maybe 5%, maybe 10% of men that come into my office that have had labs done is their estrogen levels measured. And men need their estrogen levels measured just as much as their testosterone levels. We need to know what that balance is. We need to know if it's too high. We need to know what is going on. If you have an enlarged prostate, if you have prostate cancer, you need to have estrogen levels monitored. If you are taking testosterone, you need to have estrogen levels monitored. If you're taking testosterone, men and women, you need to be also taking something possibly called DIM, D-I-M, and what that does is it reduces that enzyme aromatase, okay? So it blocks that conversion of testosterone to estrogen. So there's a balance here. Very important to keep us healthy and keep us feeling good and to not have any excess growth of anywhere in our bodies and of cancer too. And I also want to talk about something here real quickly, and that is, I'm all for hormone replacement in men and women, but I do want to caution you. I do feel very strongly that it needs to be bioidentical. And the reason why I say that is that bioidentical hormones are compounded in the pharmacy and they are not trademark, okay? If something is trademarked by a pharmaceutical company, they have to put something in there that's not natural in order to get a patent, okay? They have to do that. So if you're buying a brand name, it has been patented, which means that it is not in the form that our bodies would naturally use it. So there's a little something in there. So you're going to be paying more, but I highly recommend, excuse me, bioidenticals. Okay. So what makes our hormones malfunction? You're going to go, would you please be quiet? You sound like a broken record. Yeah, I know. Stress of any kind, change of any kind will make our hormones malfunction because it stems from our insulin, it stems from our thyroid and our adrenals and cortisol. So cortisol is produced in response to any kind of change, number one. So it can be a loss or death. And we forget how these things add up. We forget that. It can be a move. That's a change. And it can be anger. Elevates our cortisol levels, our blood sugar levels, fear, worry, anxiety, going to sleep late, under and over-exercising, overworking, sleep deprivation, hypo or hyperglycemia, so our blood sugar levels are out of whack, emotional trauma, physical trauma, which includes injury and surgery, and we forget this. We forget that when we hurt ourselves, it's got our bodies have to repair. Chronic and hidden inflammation, which can be in our GI tract or autoimmune disease, temperature extremes, maldigestion can contribute to this, malabsorption, chronic and severe allergies, food sensitivities, our standard American diet, and our thoughts, and an overall toxic load. So that's a lot. That's a lot. And I would say that most of us have at least 2 or 3 things going on at any one time, and you start adding some other things on top of it. And guess what? We've got a nice little soup and a nice little trigger going on here. Self-care of hormonal dysfunction. So, you know, easy ways. Lifestyle changes. Your nutrition, getting out things that are inflammatory. Sleep, regular and good. Slow down, journal, meditate, yoga, exercise. We've got to move our bodies, even if it's just for a walk, even if it's just for a little swim. Identify underlying intestinal tract infections, having connection and community. Notice your ants, your hypervigilance, your need to react, and taking out as many toxins as you can. Yeah, I'm a broken record. Okay, so self-care therapy. Okay, so taking this a little step further. So for insulin, this is what we can do. We can increase our fiber intake because that will help regulate our blood sugar. Eat higher amounts of proteins and good fats with every meal. Supplementation, chromium can help, and acetylcysteine, NAC. Berberine. Berberine in some studies have been shown, and I would increase this to like 200 milligrams, 200 to 500 milligrams 3 times a day. Berberine has been shown to be just as effective as metformin. So there's been some studies to show that. Alpha lipoic acid. So these are all things, and I think it's probably in the back of your self-assessment quizzes. If you need any help with this, let me know. And exercise increases your insulin sensitivity. So you need to move. Thyroid, what can help here? A little bit of iodine. I don't like to take iodine supplementation unless you've been tested to see what your iodine levels are, because it can actually, if we overload, can cause more harm than good. But the iodine you would find in sea vegetables and seaweed, it should be fine. Dandelion greens, we get vitamin A, which is wonderful. Selenium is, food sources would be herring and scallops and Brazil nuts. And selenium, and I'm recommending it down here as well, is a nutrient that helps to increase the liver's ability to pull out toxins. And I had a client here, you know, and this is early on, so I didn't know as much as I know now. And she says, yeah, I started taking selenium, and gosh, I just felt so much better, and my energy level went up. And I went, why is that? Because I didn't associate with her toxic load. And by the way, toxic load really affects thyroid. Her toxic load, which was what was affecting her thyroid. So selenium for her was really all she needed. Amazing. Gluten seems to really affect thyroid as well, so I always suggest eliminating gluten and then possibly all your grains. Vitamin D, there's a supplement called Thyroid Gold that you can order online that actually gives you a little bit of thyroid glandular, so sometimes that can help. Oh, I guess I thought vitamin D was really important because I put it twice, and I also thought that gluten was really important because I put that one twice. All right, hormonal self-care therapy as far as our sex hormones. So chasteberry can help, DIM can help in order to lower your estrogen. Progesterone cream, 2 to 30 milligrams applied at night to the thin skin area. Zymogen's got some progesterone cream. You can buy that over the counter. I'm kind of particular about the progesterone cream just because you want to make sure you buy it from a place that has what it says is in it. Okay, so it's evaluated by a third party. And I prefer progesterone cream over taking progesterone orally because progesterone can often mess up the good bacteria, so your balance in your digestive system. Some people are more sensitive to that than others. I happen to be one of them, and I have really screwed up my whole flora because of that. So I just want to warn you. Okay, if you have too high of estrogen, you want to increase your fiber to pull that out, increase your seaweed, again, get the gluten out. Turmeric helps, melatonin helps to lower estrogen and is cancer preventative, believe it or not. That dim, again, it pulls the estrogen out. Valerian root can calm and help you sleep. For low estrogen, you might want to put in some flaxseed, kind of increase that. Pomegranate oil, vitamin E. Magnesium can help with hot flashes, calm you down. Your moods can be helped with St. John's wort. Black cohosh can be helpful. Red ginseng can be really helpful as well. To increase testosterone, it would be your diet, exercise, lifestyle, dim, or to balance it out, and adrenal support. Maca root, I don't know how many of you have tried maca root. I know it's really good for people. I don't know. You know how you kind of just, you want something or you don't want something? And, but I do know that a lot of people have really had wonderful, wonderful outcomes using the maca root. Basically, it supports the thyroid and it calms and supports the adrenals, and it also is very supportive as far as your sex hormones. There's something called Mighty Maca that you can order online. It really is a great powder, and it also includes turmeric and some green powder, and along with the actual maca root. And I didn't particularly like the taste of it, but you can mix it with some things. But hey, it's a really good product, so I'm recommending it. DHA is a precursor for sex hormones, and sometimes that needs to be boosted instead of boosting our hormones up directly. And most people do well on 5 to 10 milligrams, and you can test that, either salivary or blood. By the way, you can test your hormones either salivary or blood, and if your physician is hesitant to test any of these, I do like to recommend going on to a website called Life Extensions, and you can order any set of blood work that you want. You can also do the gene testing there, and they are very reasonable. Okay. Adrenal dysregulation. Of course, you got to reduce stress. Reduce stress. Eat life-giving foods. I'm not going to go over this again because it talks about sleep, your digestive tract, all of that. But I will say this. Vitamin C, about 200 milligrams, is really helpful to bathe our adrenal glands with vitamin C, and a B complex is really supportive of our adrenal glands. If you have elevated cortisol, these are the things that can be helpful: phosphatidylserine, magnesium, the ashwagandha, L-theanine, rhodiola root. So I'm repeating this again. This should also be in the back of your self-assessment quizzes, I believe. And then if you have adrenal fatigue or low cortisol, the maca root can help, the ashwagandha, licorice root, biotin can also help. And then an actual adrenal glandular. So that glandular can come from porcine, which is pig or cow or bovine, but it's actually a little bit of adrenal gland from the animal. All right, we're almost there, guys. This is a book that if you want to jump in a little bit more, I highly recommend. This came out 3 or 4 years ago. It's called The I can't even talk, Hormone Cure by Dr. Sara Gottfried, and she's come out with 1 or 2 books since this one, I believe. And but she's really good at listing what works, what doesn't work. She's easy to follow, and I highly recommend that if you want to get into this a little bit farther. So cliff notes for this week. You want to continue eating foods from your allowed list with these exceptions. No grains at all, just for this week. And if you find that you find a big difference with no grains, then I would suggest you continue on that. No cow's milk or cheese. And I would even go a little bit farther and say, you know, if you're willing to, even get out your goat cheeses for this week. Grass-fed butter is fine, and real heavy cream is fine, okay? It doesn't have the casein in it or the lactose in it, which is what the irritant is. You're going to be eating more fats and veggies. Try out one recipe from your collection. Try to incorporate bone broth or green drinks this week, okay? Check out Sunbasket and maybe some local places to eat, Mendocino Farms, Bear Flag Fish Company. And that is all I have. Oh, no legumes either. No legumes up here. Sorry about that. Okay, guys, that is all I have to say at this point in time. I went through this very quickly. I hope it was helpful. Week 4 of your notebook has a little bit of this in it. And I'm going to open it up for questions. And I'm going to try to find... Jeanette, will you write a question real quickly so that I can possibly see what you wrote before? Because I don't know how to get back to it. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. So I'm just wait a second. If you are satisfied, don't have any questions, you're ready to roll on to the next week, I just want you to remember to be kind to yourselves, be curious, share what you try with us, because we all get boosted by that and we kind of cheer each other on, and our experience really does help others to relate, okay, and give us kind of maybe the umph and the push to try something different. So if you have to leave, if you're done, I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, and I look forward to seeing all of you or having you all here next week. And okay, I've got some questions here, and keep on going. Okay. Oh, Jeanette is sick. Oh, what do you have for bad head colds? Oh, try to get in a bath of Epsom salts and lavender and eucalyptus and make it hot. Okay, she doesn't think you're so funny. She doesn't think she can eat another nut. It's making me nuts. Well, move to different proteins then. Okay, move to different proteins. Some fats. Eat a half an avocado. Eat a third of an avocado. Put a little bit of balsamic vinegar and salt on it. Okay. Yeah, being sick is so not fun. And what I would say is get some not ginseng. Echinacea and zinc and vitamin D. And sometimes we just have to take things. Yeah, you feel pretty, at least lots of avocados too. Okay, hey, make that chocolate pudding or make some raw coconut macaroons, which is giving you some sweets. Yeah, I know, but it's giving you coconut oil, so different sorts of fats. So I know you get sick of nuts. Boost up on your salads, boost up on your vegetables, saute vegetables, put lots of olive oil on it, put lots of olive oil on your salads, use different types of veggies. And for you, Jeanette, I would stay away from any type of dairy at this point in time. Okay, I know, very sludgy. When we take that kind of stuff, we do get pretty sludgy. All right, you guys, I think that's it. Again, I thank you all, and you're all wonderful. And talk to me this week, write me, post on Facebook. Okay, good night.